Hi everyone, I'm Ava and I'm an American living in the Netherlands. And today I wanted to talk to you about public transport in this wonderful tiny country. Now before I do, I want to tell you that Dutch people these days and folks living in the Netherlands in general have a lot of opinions about trains in the Netherlands. So I thought, why not make a video and add another opinion to it? You know what it is? I understand the current frustrations about the trains in the Netherlands, but I also wanted to place it in a larger context and also to share my experiences with you because my first train ride in the Netherlands dates back to 2016. Sound like quite the explorer there. Just kidding. It was my first train ride within the Netherlands and I took the train from Amsterdam to Utrecht. I think it was Amsterdam Centraal, but I actually don't remember that. But I do remember we got on in Amsterdam and we got off in Utrecht. And during that train ride, when I stepped on the train, first of all, I was surprised that I didn't need to reserve anything before I got on the train. Then I was blown away by the fact that when we got on the train, it was not crowded at all. I will be talking about all of these things in detail, so I know what you're thinking already, but just hold that thought. So, get in, it's not that crowded. I sit down and I take a few minutes to look outside of the window. And then my girlfriend looks at me and goes, "We're here in Utrecht." For those of you who don't know, my girlfriend is Dutch. So for her, she was just familiar with the Netherlands, her country. To me, I was completely surprised that this trip was so short and it had been so comfortable. And I had just had enough time to look outside the window, take out my phone, and then next thing you knew, we were in Utrecht. That was really fast. So that actually brings me to the first thing I wanted to really talk about today, and that is the frequencies of trains. Now over the summer, which is now a few months ago, as you can see, I'm in a sweater, it is raining, it is cold, my apartment is freezing, but hey, I'm loving it. So in summer, NS, which is the Dutch National Railway, had to reduce its train schedules. Now, just like everywhere else in the world, the Netherlands also has a shortage of personnel. That has consequences. So there were fewer train rides and, that wasn't great. But I have to say that outside of this, the trains run so frequently in the Netherlands. I am blown away by how frequent they are. The trains are so frequent that I have two examples to illustrate this. One is between Utrecht, where I live, which is a city in the middle of the country. I looked up the train route from Utrecht to a suburb of Utrecht called Culemborg. If you're international, let me know. Have you heard of Culemborg before? Probably not, because Culemborg is small. You probably may not have heard of Utrecht before either, but doesn't matter. So the trains between Utrecht and Culemborg, I looked it up and I kind of expected there to be trains twice an hour. And that's pretty frequent when you talk about American standards for what we're used to. And well, I looked up the trains and indeed they are trains twice an hour between Utrecht and Culemborg, which is a relatively small place. But that's during the weekends. On the weekdays, there are trains 4 times an hour between Utrecht and Culemborg, of all places. So this is a great example of how if you wanted to live in Culemborg, you could. And you could be in Utrecht in no time. You wouldn't need to plan your train journey well in advance or a week in advance to make sure you could get into the city. The other example that I have from Utrecht is between Utrecht and Amsterdam. Guess how many trains there are between Utrecht and Amsterdam? There are about 6 trains an hour. If you lived in the US, you would be lucky to have trains twice an hour. Even from New York City to go to another city, some hours you might have trains multiple times an hour, but the rest of the day, even during the week, you could have trains just once an hour to get to New York from the commuter towns around it. Also 1 to 2 times an hour. If you live in a place that has a train about twice an hour, that's lucky. That's considered quite a bit. That said, I know that Dutch people love to complain about how there's altijd wat with the trains in the Netherlands and NS. Like if the seasons change, apparently the trains just don't know how to function anymore. Like the train company doesn't know how to deal with it. So things that I've heard and heard other people complain about are leaves on the tracks. Of course, it's fall and there are leaves. Oh, there's gonna be a delay with the train. Or it's too cold and the mechanisms to, change the tracks froze over. can't do anything about that. There's gonna be a little delay, it's gonna take some time. Or it's too hot and the tracks expand. I don't know, there's just a wide array of things that you didn't know. And it's like also NS tells you what the problems are. In the US, you would just stand there being like, I have no idea what's wrong. They could be clearing up the tracks and the leaves in New York, but I wouldn't know. The next thing I wanted to talk about was comfort. Comfort can encompass a wide variety of things. And one of the things I wanted to focus on was the train itself, because in the Netherlands, like I mentioned on my first train ride, I just really found the whole experience to be comfortable. In the US, when you get on a train, it's typically extremely crowded. You maybe don't really expect to have a seat unless you get the longer distance trains, and then you do get a seat. Also, if you do get a seat and it's not that bad, the seats are cramped, really close together, not the kind of seats that you see in the Netherlands on the trains. Now I know it can get pretty busy in the Netherlands because it's a small, dense country, and also rush hour is intense. I know, especially now when the trains are shorter, so it gets really very busy in the Netherlands. I mean, my girlfriend told me that she had a week just a couple of weeks ago, and she told me this every single day, that there were people that week that had to just be left behind on the platform because the trains were just too full, because the trains were like third of the size they normally are because they aren't enough employees. That is currently a not so great situation. I've also personally experienced on my commute that the trains are busier, so, well, yeah, that's not fun. Hoping that changes soon. But the thing is, in the US, also when the trains are really busy, they're also kind of dirty, and there's just a lack of resources that you very clearly see. Like I mentioned, cramped, whereas the seats in the Netherlands, you walk into the train and they're spacious, they're comfortable. When you actually sit down, you feel like you're in one of the fancier trains in the US that you paid a lot more for. Amtrak, which still has delays and is way too expensive and doesn't run often enough. You know what you have in the Netherlands that we don't have in the US on our trains? Trash cans at every aisle. Just fantastic. Like anywhere you sit. In the US, I have to say people do try and not litter everywhere. They try and throw their trash in trash cans. But still, it's just this matter of comfort. You don't have that. Just funny because I always talk about how Dutch people like to be uncomfortable and there's more focus on comfort in the US. It's like they forgot about it when it came to trains. Now, the other aspects of train travel here in the Netherlands that I find comfortable has to do with actually how the whole idea of a train station is viewed. Because at every train station here in the Netherlands, I do find that there are a lot of conveniences surrounding it. So for instance, in Utrecht, there's actually a whole station hall full of shops.
And also kiosks. Oh my God. Look, there's so many of them. There's one on this platform, one on that platform. There's one over there. There's one on the platform I'm standing on. And
it's also not the only option. You can get food at very many other vendors, and you can also find a HEMA at some of these station halls. Now, of course, these are the big city station halls, and that is quite similar in the US, where it's some of the really big train stations, you will have a lot of stores. That's just good business. But what I was surprised at is that some of the smaller stations in the Netherlands also at least have a kiosk, or what is called a huiskamer. I've seen that these cute little stores basically where you can get a coffee or some pastries or a little snack, they're always available. Whereas in the US, you get a vending machine. The next point I want to talk about is that in the Netherlands, you also have other train companies, not just NS. And in those cases, if you need to go, let's say from Utrecht to, when I went to the Waddeneilanden, one of the Dutch islands, to go camping, I had to go to Frisia, and in Frisia, I had to get off at Leeuwarden, I believe, and go to one of the smaller towns in Friesland. So in order to do that, I had to take the NS train, and then transfer to a different train company and take a more local train. Now, in the US, you also have similar constructions. But in the US, for instance, if you wanted to take local trains from Philadelphia to New York City, if you drove, it would be 2 hours between these two cities, and they're both located in the Northeast. From Philadelphia, you could somehow get on the New Jersey Transit. I know people are like, Philadelphia is not in New Jersey. I know, but you could somehow get on the New Jersey Transit. And if you wanted to go from the New Jersey Transit to the New York City Transit, you do have to like go through a big station, and it takes some time. Sometimes if you want to go from one company to another, it's not even at the same station. You have to kind of get out and go to another place. Like, this sounds familiar to you, right? But in the Netherlands, I was amazed. I just got off the train station and I checked out, and then I checked in right next to it, next to the pole where I checked out. And it was maybe a 20-second walk to a different track. And over there, I could just check in. So just on a different platform, all easily accessible. I didn't even need to go up and down one of these annoying bridges. And I just got on the local train within Friesland. It was so easy. And if I wasn't paying attention and there wasn't this like check out, check in mechanism, which you have to do, I wouldn't have known they were different trains. And the last thing I wanted to talk about on this topic has to do with money. Because I've heard a lot of Dutch people tell me, Ava, I know you like the trains here, that's great, but you have to admit they're a bit expensive. You know, I admit, because when I first started commuting to work here in this country, I definitely felt a pinch in my wallet when I was at a job that wasn't paying for my commute. They were only partially covering it. And now at my current job, they pay for my commute. Thank you, please don't stop, because it is expensive. But that said, it's more expensive in the US, like by a lot. And I wanted to talk about, as an example, going from New York City to a different city in the Northeast. For those of you not familiar, the Northeast in the US is really like the Randstad in the Netherlands, because there are just so many major cities all on that one coast. And it's like all in the north too, and the distances between them are not that big for American standards. So it should be easy to go between these cities, but I have found that it's actually quite expensive when you're trying to take the train. So to New York to Washington, D.C., it's about 3 hours, 20 minutes on the train. And well, I looked that up as an example and compared it to taking the train from Den Helder, which is kind of north of the country, to Nijmegen, which is more towards the south. So the distances between the two are about the same. So for both of these, it's about 3 hours, right? So to go between New York City and Washington, D.C., you would need to book your train through Amtrak. That's the American train system. Okay, you go through Amtrak and then you have multiple train options. And the thing is, you first of all have to reserve. So it's not like in the Netherlands, if I wanted to go from Den Helder to Nijmegen, I could just show up in Den Helder. But in the US, you would have to reserve. And if you reserve your train a month, 2 months, 3 months in advance, the tickets are not so bad. You might get lucky and get a pretty decent ticket, and then the prices are the same between the two places. However, if I'm trying to go see my family, like next week or 2 weeks later, oh my God, it is like 4 times as expensive to go between Den Helder and Nijmegen and New York and DC. Between Den Helder and Nijmegen, it's about like 27-ish euros without any discount. And the cheapest ticket I saw between DC and New York, if you book far out in advance, was 31, which is where I said, okay, those are comparable. But if you are trying to book for next week or 2 weeks later, you are looking to pay about 130, 150 bucks if you're getting the standard tickets and not traveling at 3 a.m. Which, okay, but that was the only train that was less than this 130, 150 that I found when I was looking for 2 weeks later from the date I'm filming this video. Dutch people are like, yeah, that's fine. I plan my calendar more than 2 weeks in advance. Yeah, except when it comes to the trains. You folks aren't used to it. I know, trust me, I've seen you. And you know what it is? It's like these trains between major cities in the US, they really remind me of the Eurostar or the Thalys in the Netherlands, where you can take them from Amsterdam or Rotterdam to go to Paris, London, Berlin, what have you. But then you're going to Paris, London, and Berlin, and you're paying comparable prices. So what people typically do in the US is they take the bus. And I have to say the buses in the US between major cities, in the Northeast at least, not that bad. And I hate buses because I get really sick on them. But it's just the other option is this extremely expensive train. Whereas for buses, oh gosh, I remember from New York, if I wanted to go to Boston, because I had a friend who was studying up in Boston and I wanted to visit her all the time. So you could just show up in New York, Chinatown, and take the Chinatown bus for $15 and go to Boston without even reserving. Now there are multiple companies over the years, and even back then, there's the Greyhound that's been around for a really long time, the Megabus, and all of these are affordable options to travel between these cities. In Europe, there is now the Flixbus that takes you across Europe, so that is a similar idea. So I actually think it's kind of cool that there is this one thing that works in the US and that is now coming to Europe. So those were some things I wanted to share with you today about public transport in the Netherlands and in the US. I'm sure you have thoughts on this, so don't hesitate to let me know in the comments down below. And as usual, until next time.